have a bunch of participants today, which is fantastic. And I am really excited to introduce Doug, who's an instructional design consultant for us. But before I do that, I want to quickly introduce you to our newest members of the content team, Lindsay and Tanner. Most of you have probably started corresponding with them over email. They are our amazing new content development associates. We're so excited to have them joining us. So just wanted to welcome them here formally. And then to basically tee it up for Doug to walk us through assessment design. As I said, Doug is has been working as an instructional design expert for us and will be consulting with us on a variety of different projects. But one request that we've received consistently from our faculty is, are there ways you can train us to be better at designing these challenging multiple choice assessments? It's a really tricky business, and I think that hopefully Doug can provide us with some strategies and techniques today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug to get his presentation started. Oh, one little housekeeping rule I should have mentioned. As you can probably tell, not all of our participants can speak. You'll have to type your comments and questions into the chat pane, which you should see in the bottom right-hand corner of your Adobe Connect window. I wish we could figure out a way to have you all just be able to speak to us, but what ends up happening is a lot of microphone feedback. So for now, just type in your comments, and Tanner and Lindsay and I will be monitoring it, and we'll interrupt Doug if we see something that needs to be addressed right away. Otherwise, we'll just wait to the end and we'll present them to Doug at that point. One last note, we will be making an archived version of this available on YouTube in case you need to.
Jennifer, thank you so much, and Tanner, thank you as well, and hello everybody. I wish you could see me, but as long as you can see the PowerPoint, that will be great. So, as Jen mentioned, I'm going to take all of us through the multiple choice question, tips and strategies for success. And my background in this is basically as a faculty member, and I taught in community college for a number of years, and so had to develop multiple choice questions as well as other questions for the writing courses I taught and the journalism courses I've taught. And so now, working in the area of learning, design, and technology, I've had to look at the multiple choice question a bit more deeply from an assessment standpoint, and whether you are new to academia or online training, or you're an old hand, pretty much everybody knows that there is a big focus now on assessment and student learning outcomes. The point of this is that if you can design a better multiple choice question, then you will better assess what your students are learning in the class, which means that you can make a case to your administrators about why you should have tenure, why you should get a promotion, and also just be proud of the fact that your students are being successful learners, which is really why most of us are in this game. We want to help students achieve their goals and dreams. And so this presentation is called the multiple choice question, tips and strategies for success. And so, because learning outcomes are important in this session, but also important for your students going into a course, I want to model for you good instructor behavior. So I've listed the learning outcomes for you, and they're very simple. At the conclusion of this seminar, you should have a better awareness of the sophistication of multiple choice questions. You should also be able to write better multiple choice questions. And then it's really critical that you understand the importance of linking your learning outcomes for your courses to the questions that you create. And so you might want to take out a pencil and paper and jot down a couple of quick notes. Following the presentation, you'll see a list of references that you can use. You should also know that there's a lot of information on the web and online at the various universities and academic institutions on creating multiple choice questions. So just a few basics. So you've probably written multiple choice questions of some type before, and if you hadn't written any questions, this will be important in terms of setting some basics, things you should consider when planning to write a multiple choice question. So as I mentioned, you want to relate each item to an instructional goal. So usually on the course syllabus, that's where you place your learning outcomes statements, your objectives. The language used to describe this part of the syllabus can differ from campus to campus, but generally it's a statement for students, for the state in many cases, and for your deans to know what it is you expect students to learn. And typically in the past, these items have been sort of throw down pieces of the syllabus, and a lot of folks haven't given a lot of thought to them, but now again with the renewed focus on student success and faculty accountability, it really is important that you understand, and I know you understand as subject matter experts what you want your students to learn, but you should better understand how the learning outcomes connect to what you're going to assess students on. So each item, each multiple choice question should be able to link directly back to a specific learning outcome. Use the language of your instructional goals. So don't state a learning outcome statement using certain language and then in the test question change the types of words you use, because that's going to create a disconnect for the students. So we don't want to make it necessarily easy for students, but we don't want to put a lot of cognitive load on them if we don't have to, because after all, we want to know what it is they're learning in our course and where gaps are, where we need to go back. Make sure stems and options agree, and I'm going to talk about stems in a little bit. Basically, that's the question of the multiple choice portion, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Avoid negative statements. Some of these are just guidelines. I wish I could tell you specifically why we're saying avoid negative statements. But I can tell you as a journalist, as a former journalist, one of the things that you used to do is you always stated things in the positive. You stated things as they are, not negative. So that's probably as good an explanation about no negative statements. It's just important. Avoid use of absolute words, always, all, only, never. And don't give clues to the answer in the question that you ask or in the responses. That's probably a lot easier to do giving away an answer than it is to write a successful multiple choice question that actually forces a student, compels a student, encourages a student to respond with what they know. Another issue that comes up with multiple choice questions and testing of any kind is the issue of validity and reliability. And so you researchers out there, you docs out there know that in a research design, validity and reliability are really important. The bottom line is, can you trust the responses students are giving to you on your multiple choice questions, and are the questions actually asking what it is you think they're asking? Both of these go to the issue, those statements go to the issue of validity and reliability. So validity is a measure of how well you test samples and the range of your students' knowledge, skills, and abilities. And reliability depends on the grading consistency and discrimination between students of differing performance levels. So again, the notion that you want your questions to be able to ask what you think they're asking and then have the responses distinguish between students of varying ability. So when we talk about multiple choice questions, it might be a good idea to think of the Bloom's taxonomy in the back of your head. That's one of the really long-standing, credible taxonomies of higher order thinking skills. And so when you think of multiple choice questions, you should think of the questions based on testing different cognitive levels. So, for example, a knowledge level question or a recall-based question would ask students to acknowledge in the answer that they know facts, principles, or terminology. Knowledge level questions are important because it is important for students to have a grasp of language, especially, say, in chemistry or physics or English or whatever it is, because if they don't know the language, then it's going to be very hard for the instructor to explain concepts based on that language. So people are sometimes dismissive of knowledge level questions, but they are important. So the next level of cognition is an application style question in which a student would have to solve problems or analyze something, and what comes to mind, of course, is math or statistics, or I guess physics or chemistry, or engineering problem. Excuse me. The next level is evaluation, in which a student is required to exercise informed judgment or to analyze a situation. And so as you look at these cognitive levels, excuse me, they go from lower levels of cognition to higher levels of cognition. And there's a real focus in higher education these days, and also secondary schools, on higher order thinking skills. So now it's time to talk about a test matrix. And so what is a test matrix? Well, let's take a look. So we just finished talking about the cognitive levels. And so you see several categories here and roles. So one of the categories is recall, application, and evaluation. And then you have the topics. Topic 1, topic 2, and topic 3. So the topics would actually be aligned with what you have listed in your learning outcomes. And so what you can do is you can actually build a test matrix like this. And so based on this example, which is from the University of North Carolina Center for Teaching and Learning, you can see that on the left side, for topic 1, recall, 10% of the questions for multiple choice were based on a recall or a knowledge level multiple choice question. Application questions for topic 1 were also 10%, and then evaluation questions were 5%. Topic 2, going across from left to right, you see recall at 5%, application 10%, evaluation 25%. So if you were just examining this and listening to what I'm saying, and you see that topic 2 has an evaluation question at 25%, that means whatever that topic is for that instructor, that evaluation level multiple choice question is very important because it accounts for 25% of the questions in topic 2. Then the same with topic 3, recall 5, application 10, evaluation 20%. So the thing here is that when you make a matrix like this, your goal is to balance the number of questions that you give in the category that you give it.
Doug. She said,
so this example may not be exactly or precisely balanced, but for this course, and I don't know what course this is, you can see that for topics 2 and 3,
if you want to expand on that a little bit,
evaluation questions account for 45% of what the test questions are asking students. So that's pretty important, and I would venture to say that the instructor who created this probably can tie topics 2 and 3 level evaluations to the learning outcomes. So the bottom line is topics 2 and 3 regarding evaluation are very important topics in the course, and we might assume that the other topics are somewhat less important. Perhaps those are knowledge level questions. And I think since I'm just kind of rolling along here, I'll just pause a moment in case anyone has some questions. I blew through that pretty quickly. And Tanner will just let me know if there are any questions, and if there aren't, I'll just move along. Sure, and Jen, you're absolutely right. And so the faculty members listening in have a lot of authority and power over students in terms of assigning percentages to questions, multiple choice questions. And so I think the important point here is not to get caught up too much in the numbers you're seeing on the screen, but rather think of the test matrix as a way for you, the faculty member, to get an eyeball judgment of not only what kind of questions you're asking, but whether or not those questions are important in terms of the learning outcomes. So for example, the questioner wanted to know, how do you assign percentages to questions? That's really something that the subject matter expert, the faculty member, has to decide, because after all, the faculty members put together the syllabus and put together the course, and it's up to the faculty member to determine in the window of time available what is important to teach in this course. So it seems to me, if you're an English teacher teaching freshman level English, or maybe developmental English, or maybe it's a composition course, it seems to me that a lot of the questions, and you can ask a multiple choice question that addresses higher order thinking skills, and we're going to look at some of those. It seems to me that if you're going to give a multiple choice question as an English teacher, and that's valid, it seems to me a lot of those questions are going to be questions focused on evaluation. Again, you want the student who reads that essay or writes that essay, I guess in this case it would be reading a book or a chapter, and Jen's an English teacher, she would know better about this particular subject area. But it seems to me that your multiple choice questions for English are probably going to be higher order, requiring synthesis, critical thinking, and they're going to be evaluation oriented. So you're going to likely have a high percentage of those sort of questions. Freshman chemistry may be completely different. Before you can talk about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, I think that's chemistry, right? You better know a little bit about, that's physics actually, you better know a little bit about the language used to describe that principle, and I'm sure some of the faculty out there are going to set me straight on that. So you might have some more knowledge-based level questions in a chemistry or physics class, because the terms are very important in explaining theories and concepts in those disciplines, and there are some very specific things and language accorded to those disciplines. Is anybody? Yes. I think that the formation of the questions and the process, and what we're talking about here is a process. I don't know that the open book nature of an exam really impacts the question so much, other than that when I think of a multiple choice question, I usually think of that as something that I do without allowing open book. So let's see, I'm thinking out loud here, but I think that would be important with the validity and reliability of the test, because if you are doing an open book multiple choice, I think this creates an issue with a variable assigned to the test that we call a confounding variable that's going to actually change the test results only when you present the results of those multiple choice questions to your department for, let's say, a departmental level assessment. No one's going to know that it was a multiple choice test. So I think it might skew the results. So as long as you, in creating your assessment plan, which should be broad-based and include not only multiple choice tests, I know what we're talking about multiple choice tests here, then I think it would be incumbent to acknowledge what the context for that test is. That's a really good question, and I hope my answer is adequate to that. I'm not suggesting that you don't do open book tests. Another aspect of your question goes to the issue of student access to internet technologies and smartphones and other electronic resources. And so your question actually goes more to me, more to today's student who, when asked a question, as happens in your classes, they pull out their smartphone, they Google it, and they give you the answer. So in that sense, the textbook becomes a resource for answering the question. So if you want to give a question like that and let students use their Google or their textbooks, I think that as an instructor, you're empowered to do that. I do think that it's important that that sort of thing be acknowledged. And I just want to say also, there are a lot of gray areas here, and I'm going to try to address your questions as best I can. I do know that online, that would be a real issue. Open book, if it's an online class, you don't know what your student is doing to answer that question. So that's why the matrix and the process is important, but it's also important to vary the questions, because it's a lot harder to answer an evaluative question, even as a multiple choice, by Googling it, which a student could do very easily with a knowledge level based question. And I think I'm talking too much, so I hope I answered that question. That was a tough one. The presentation today is overly simplistic, and so it's my hope that rather than looking at the categories presented and the information presented as silos, as hard-coded into how you do a multiple choice test, I want to encourage all the faculty members out there to use these as guidelines, and that if you feel there's a better way to link all of these, or to keep them separated, or to do more evaluation, or more application, or more recall, then I think there's some experimentation that you can do, and go ahead and do that. I mean, the faculty members really know their subject areas, they know what to test for, they know what to teach, and so I'm not going to sit here and tell you you can't combine them all into an evaluative question that addresses application and recall. I can suggest that an evaluative multiple choice question as a higher order question on the Bloom's taxonomy will actually test lower order thinking skills. And so that's again why I think it's important to look at this as process, mix up the questions, track the questions that you're doing, and link the questions to specific learning outcomes. Otherwise, it's really up to you and your students to talk about what they're going to learn and how you're going to assess it. I hope that makes sense. I don't always know. Okay, Tanner. I guess I should have moved to this slide faster. So, how does the matrix play out? So when you start to track the questions you're asking and what categories they fall into, you end up with something that looks like this. So on the left, you see the topics. To the right of the topics, you see the category of question, recall. Then you see the application category, and then you see the evaluation. So this instructor, and I'm sorry I don't know what kind of class this is, this instructor, for the topic in the course of identity crisis, role confusion, and achievement motivation, it's probably a student success or psychology class. Questions 2 and 9 were recall. Questions 4, 21, and 33 on a 33-question multiple choice test were application, and question 16 was evaluation. 18% of the questions on the multiple choice addressed topic A. For topic B, adolescent sexual behavior, transition of puberty, questions 5 and 8 were recall questions or knowledge level questions. Questions 1, 13, and 26 were application questions. And then question 11 was evaluation. Again, 18%. So I'm just going to jump down to D, topic, on the left side. And then moving across, we see egocentrism, adolescent idealism, recall 7 and 29. Those are questions 7 and 29. The application, questions 12 and 31. And then we see for evaluation 10, 15, and 27, for a total of 21% on egocentrism and adolescent idealism. So I want to stop right there and just throw out a rhetorical question to you before I even go through the rest of the chart, and I may not go through the rest of the chart. What does topic D tell you about this particular multiple choice test and the relevance and the priority of egocentrism, adolescent idealism to the student learning outcomes expected in this class? So clearly, I hope it's clear, 21% of this multiple choice test is focused on egocentrism and adolescent idealism. I guess we could draw some conclusions about what kind of class this is. But again, in terms of process, in terms of aligning test questions with specific learning outcomes, this instructor can now go to his or her multiple choice test, not only gauge the content But on the assessment side, once the students answer the multiple choice test, if questions 7, 29, 12, and 31, and 10, 15, and 27 have a high error rate, or a lot of students get those questions wrong, and that's supposed to be 21% of the multiple choice test, 21% of the multiple choice test, then that instructor knows that somehow, somewhere, some kind of way, something was missed. The students had a high percentage of errors for question D, which the instructor weighted heavily on this test. So that's important for a number of reasons. It's mainly important because as faculty members, I know all of you would be wondering, well, how did 21% or how did a high percentage of students miss egocentrism and adolescent idealism, because it was a very important concept in the class, and I know I spent a lot of time on it. What happened? So by organizing questions this way on the multiple choice, you can actually go back and look, and you might be doing this in Blackboard, you might be using Scantrons or bubble chart multiple choice test. You can actually go back and then you can look at your lesson, and you can say, well, what happened in this unit? You know, it could be that there was a big tragedy that day in town, so students taking the test were not focused on what they should be doing. It could be that whatever language was used in the course or the exercises used, perhaps they need a new look from the faculty member as a way to improve those scores. Maybe something could be done a bit differently. And as faculty members, we're always wondering, am I reaching the student? Are they getting it? Do they understand? So by following this process with the matrix, you get some data that you can use to adjust your teaching, and we hope, if that's necessary to adjust your teaching, we hope improve student learning outcomes. And that's really what this multiple choice seminar is all about. What are they learning? How did they learn it? How do we know they learned it? So I'm going to continue on. I won't go through the rest of this chart unless there are some other questions. And Tanner, you can just stop me if need be. So, okay, so there are some basics, some process on how to structure a multiple choice test in terms of cognitive levels and content. You want to vary the content. So now, what about the questions? So there are some guidelines for writing questions, and I struggled a little with this. There are some examples coming up. I didn't want to put too many examples, but I did want to show you some credible examples that I hope you can use when you practice writing multiple choice questions. And I think intention here is really important. So all you faculty who are here on a Tuesday at 11 o'clock, I know that you're very concerned about your students and that you care, or you wouldn't be on here, because probably a lot of your colleagues are not online here. So here's some guidelines for you. So I said earlier we were going to talk about the STEM, so here it is. So what is the STEM? The STEM of a multiple choice item poses the problem or states the question. That's all it is. So students should be able to understand the question the first time they read it. And again, that's not set in stone. You're going to see an example that doesn't fit this guideline. But those are just two simple guidelines. So here's an example of a comprehension question. It's just a statement. There's no answers here. Which of the following statements is an example of a democratic political belief? Actually, there may be on here if I maybe did it as another slide. I'm not sure. No. So I'm going to go back to that question. So which of the following statements is an example of a democratic political belief. If you were going to just fill in the blanks here, I'm going to make this up because my answers didn't make it onto the slide for some reason. The response might be, you know, A, communist philosophy, it might be socialist theory, democracy. The answer is not so important here. What it is the question, and this question is designed to essentially show you, keep it clear, keep it tight, keep it simple, understand it on the first take. And I apologize for the answers dropping off there. I'm not sure what happened to that. I'm going to go on to the next one. So here's that same question rephrased. Although Jason did not like to see the American flag burned, he did not think people should be arrested for such an act of expression. Jason's opinion could be characterized as A, democratic political belief, socialist political belief, anarchist political belief, or communist political belief. So the answer is A. Again, an example of comprehension level question. It's clear from the question what the student is being asked, and then the responses are also clear. So here's another example of a knowledge item and a comprehension item, excuse me, side by side. So just read those. On the left, the first state of alcoholism is characterized by malnutrition, addition of alcohol, rationalization of drinking behavior, or reverse alcohol tolerance. So the correct answer is C, rationalization of drinking behavior. So again, what you should be paying attention to here is not so much the response, although it is important, but the simplicity of the question, how clear it is. And then the choices, there are no easy answers there. Even though this is a knowledge level item, a student who hasn't done the required readings or the assignment will likely get this knowledge level question wrong. And this is the kind of question in a psychology class on adolescent behavior, I think we were talking about earlier, that you might include as a lower level sort of question, a knowledge item. And so then the same question is asked differently on the right-hand side, where we have a comprehension item. And again, that's just a category from the cognitive levels. Susan believes her drinking behavior will lessen once she finishes a big project. Susan's explanation is particularly representative of the first stage of alcoholism, second stage of alcoholism, third stage of alcoholism, and that should actually be stage, not state. My bad. Fourth stage of alcoholism. So the answer is A, first stage of alcoholism. So this is an example of how we change the knowledge item, this is a lower order test question, into a comprehension or application item. And really what's necessary is just to play around with these and practice them. So here is another application item. And so on the left, we have the question, and I couldn't fit it all neatly into one column, so I broke the question up on the left side of the screen and then put the answers on the right side of the screen. And so I mentioned earlier, I said one of the guidelines was keep it simple. This is not a simple question. Read that and see if you can understand it on the first try. I was challenged to do that. So this is a complex physiology question, high order thinking skill here. And this time I put a star next to the correct answer. So you physiologists out there and healthcare faculty members probably already knew the answer. You want to establish a control group. This is a research question. And then again, just looking at some of the other options for the student: extend the exercise program for a longer period of time, periodically check to see if the subjects are following the exercise program, and then D, compare the subjects to people without high blood pressure at the end of the study. I'm not a biologist or a physiologist, but again, this is just an example. There are guidelines on how to write multiple choice questions. Now might be a good question, Tanner, to ask if there are any questions. I'm sorry, Tanner, you broke up there. Could you ask me that question again? I would say this is an analysis level, analysis evaluation. I think there's some cross-pollination there. But that's what I would say this question is. I'm not aware of a guideline on how to structure the questions as they appear on the exam, but I will offer something that I know about how a course is structured or should be structured, particularly a course that is, emphasizes constructivism in the approach to the lessons and to the content. And so essentially, when students come into an online course or into a classroom, it's the faculty member's job in a constructivist-oriented class to assess the student's prior knowledge through some type of pre-test or assessment. The idea being that sometimes students have flawed prior knowledge about a subject, sometimes at which the instructor wants to correct and be aware of, and then sometimes students know a lot more than we give them credit for knowing when they come into the classroom. And so once that pretest is given, a bar is set, a figurative bar, and the course actually starts or could start from that standpoint. As the faculty member and the students proceed through the course in a constructivist learning environment, and even and evolve the questions from lower order to higher order as I go through my course, remembering to mix it up.
Thanks, Doug. That's awesome. And we have one more question. Schwan asks, can we use multiple choice questions to measure any items that cannot be taught or that cannot be cognitive?
I think you can do that, and the suggestion I have for you is the one that's on the screen. I'm just going to move forward quickly to see if I have another slide. I'm just going to pull up this next slide. So this is an analysis level question, and I think the faculty member who just asked the question was wanting to know about complexity, higher order. Higher level thinking skills. So here we have an example of that. So can you ask a multiple choice question to assess at higher levels? Absolutely. So this chart may or may not be clear to you online, but on the left you can see a bar chart, and on the vertical axis you see number of heart attacks, and on the horizontal axis you see type of activity. And so just looking at this, from the 10,000 foot level, you see at the top, there's some writing up there. Then the student sees bar charts in the middle of the screen. Then there's a caption, which is actually at the top here, that says suggested basis for heart attacks in Chicagoland area. This is starting to look like an old GRE question to me. And then you have this bar chart. So right away, the student has to decipher what's important in this picture because it's not spelled out. The student has to interpret, evaluate, and analyze the information is presented. So looking at the chart now, and I'm having trouble reading that myself, unfortunately. So now I violated my own rules, which said keep it clear, by presenting a chart that's a little bit difficult to read as an example, so my bad. Let's look at the question now. A correct conclusion that can be drawn from the graph is, A, it was more dangerous to shovel snow than to use a snowblower. It was less dangerous to engage in snow removal activity than not to engage in snow removal activity. More deaths were related to non-snow removal activity, and people with heart conditions should purchase a snow blower. So what I just did is probably typical of what a student might do, which is to look at the chart, be unable to read it for whatever reason, and then to go and read the questions and begin to, by a process of elimination, try to arrive at the answer. What is clear to me is that we have some explanation at the top. The figure below illustrates the number of deaths in the Chicagoland area from heart attacks that occurred during snow removal or non-removal activity in the 3-day period from December 14th through 16th, 2000. So first, the student has to interpret and analyze the significance of that statement. Then the student has to go to the chart. So we see on the vertical axis, the number of heart attacks, and then type of activity. So that far right bar chart looks like not removing snow. The middle one is using a snow shovel. And then the smaller one is using a snow blower. And I just want you to know that it's not so much the graphic as I presented it, it's my aging eyes that makes the screen hard to see. The answer is more deaths were related to non-snow removal activity. Kind of interesting. This may or may not be a good example. I do think that it makes the case that you can test for higher order thinking skills using pictures and graphs and models. And we do understand that models can be effective not only as learning aids, but we also know that data interpretation, data analysis in the STEM fields and in other fields is really important. So maybe this isn't the best example, but you can use things like pictures, charts, artwork, other visuals consistent with the American with Disabilities Act online, and then form test questions surrounding the data that's presented in the chart or in the image. So the answer to your question is yes. This is an example of it. I think I could have chosen a better example, but it is possible to use multiple choice questions to test for higher order thinking skills. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and it's really easy in Adobe Connect here to sort of just kind of go off on my own and talk. And so that's going to conclude the presentation. But I am going to put up here a list of references for you that I used, and the PowerPoint is cited with the reference, and you can use these to practice multiple choice questions, develop multiple choice questions. And if you're working other places other than Saylor, the Teaching and Learning office on your campus usually has a lot of resources, and there is a ton of stuff on this on the internet. So I'll open it up now for some more questions if there are any, and I hope that you found this informative and useful, and if you did, then that's really great and I'm happy. If you didn't, then I would like you to ask me some questions, and Jen also knows how to get in touch with me. If you'd like my email address, I'd be happy to share that as well too. Sure, I can do that, and what I will need to do is send an invitation. Well, let's see. I may be able to download the slides and share them. If you will, or if someone, how about this, Tanner? My email address is dougwilson3@gmail.com, and I'm just guessing this is okay with Jen. If you want access to the slide presentation, I know Jen is going to put it up on YouTube, but if you want direct access to it, just email me and I'll send you a link to the Prezi, so long as it's okay with Jen. I think it'll be. Jen, is it okay with you to do that? Yeah, sure thing. That's Doug Wilson. That's Doug Wilson 3. It's all one word. Doug Wilson, the number 3@gmail.com. And I'll just give you access to the Prezi, and you'll just have infinite access to it forever. Wow. I'm sure there is one for consistency and validity. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I think that I put that portion of the presentation in there because it is important for test reliability to mix up the questions in such a way that you have some knowledge level, you have some higher order thinking questions in there, and specifically a question about that